At Cerius, we provide a lot of content and thought leadership as part of what we do. Given the rate of change and the talent-driven nature of the workforce of the future, we have seen an increased trend of companies needing to level up their human capital capabilities. This resulted in HR being one of the fastest evolving areas of a company. We want to make sure it's easy to stay up to date on the latest changes, the latest trends. Really, how do we support CEOs as part of their HR leadership? So to accomplish this, we created Cerius HR Today. In this month's session, we're going to explore optimizing workforce benefits from 3 industry experts who will give you the insights that will give you the edge to help the companies you serve. We have today what I call the dream team of benefits. We know one size does not fit all, and there are a lot of options. How do we keep up to date on what's ahead with healthcare benefits? Who's moving out of state, in state, who's not available to what company size? They're going to give you a lot of that information, including what they're personally experiencing that you may not be aware of. Really, how do we evaluate what works best for the organizations you're serving? Some behind the scenes information that they'll share. Again, we've got their LinkedIn profiles in the chat. We're going to start with Greg Hack, owner of IntelliBenefits Insurance Services. And I've known Greg for a number of years, and I've always appreciated his holistic view to employee benefit landscape because it's never been more tumultuous. There are changes on a nearly daily basis. So when I asked Greg to provide some insights and industry updates, rather than being more than happy to take up 45 minutes all to himself, he suggested, let's give a really good comprehensive view and recommended 2 individuals to join us that he often collaborates with. They've had some interesting clients together, and we'll share an example later in the session. We also have Archie Coop, owner of FinServe PEO Brokers, where he helps transform access to the PEO industry for small to mid-sized businesses. And then James Corrales with EVHC, who helps employers really take back control of their healthcare spend, which I know it's unheard of, that we actually want to be able to control the spend. Does that through education, transparency, and really some tailored solutions that you'll hear about, especially through one of the case studies that they share. And he is our self-insured industry expert. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our benefits dream team, starting with Mr. Hack.
Thank you so much. I want you to know that if you and I are doing a webinar in 20 years, I'm still going to be using that picture. That's a 20-year-old picture, but I'll be using that as long as possible. And Archie clearly posted his prom picture. I see the boutonniere.
Yes.
You look very handsome there, Archie.
Thank you.
And James is the only one with courage to post a picture within the past 5 years. So looking dapper, gentlemen. So thank you for joining us today. Just to elaborate a little bit, I've been doing benefits for over 20 years. I opened my brokerage over 10 years ago and exclusively employee benefits. So the medical, dental, vision, life, disability on the group platform. So very niche. Don't do the workers' comp, no retirement, no individual. I partner with all of that. But really today, I want to help you to become a better purchaser of your healthcare, but really you're purchasing your insurance broker. With very few exceptions, brokers, we're all selling the same product and the same price. Pricing differentials between brokers is super negligible. Many brokers puff their chests, especially if they're a large national well-known brokerage, to try and persuade you that they've got buying leverage power. They really don't. It's negligible at best. There's no barriers to entry for brokers. So even your smallest regional brokerage versus your Acrisure, your Aon, your big national brokerage, we all have access to the same solutions. So my priorities when supporting clients, and of course your expectations from your broker, in a perfect world, they're syncing up. And ultimately, the person, the day-to-day that we're working with is HR, and we need to make them look good. We do that by you knowing that we're going to leave no stone unturned. And I think that a very unfair ask that many brokers have is at renewal, we scour the market, we make the recommendation to the client, but ultimately they have to then package that up and convey it to the C-suite or the decision makers in their organization. And that's really an unfair ask. So we package all of the renewals into about a 10-minute video with the explicit intent of take this summary. I'm not going to ask you to do it, and forward this on up the food chain because it's much more efficient and it just makes HR look good. Secondly, it's presenting unique solutions. Most of the time, well before the renewal, we know ultimately if the client is probably going to renew with the same carrier or not. We know what's in the market, but it's very easy to be complacent and still not scour the market. And so we have to be mindful that it's not up to the broker to determine what's a material savings to force disruption, pain, uncomfortableness, right? We work with folks like James to show a self-insured solution. We work with folks like Archie to show a PEO solution. A lot of brokers can be insecure knowing that the companies that are represented by a self-insured provider like James, a PEO broker like Archie, those companies are directly targeting our clients. And so you don't want to bring those solutions to the table after the fact in a reactionary manner. We want to take the initiative and say, I may be jeopardizing losing you as a client, but you, HR, have an accountability to the fiduciary responsibility to your management that we're going to show you the PEO solutions. We're going to show you the self-insured solutions. And again, you determine how much savings is material, right, to force a significant change upon your population. And then what's often forgotten about is every company has a culture of how they shop, price. Insurance is much more service related. HR gets it, but quite often the folks they report to are very price conscious, and as they should be. But really, the broker is earning their salt by providing the service the other 9 months of the year outside of renewal. Let's just kind of remind you though how insurance is priced, right? There's two markets. There's small group and large group. Small group, typically pricing is derived on the county the company is based on and the date of birth of the member and maybe their zip code to determine if a product is available in that market. But no broker is negotiating pricing for a 60 life group, right? So it really levels the playing field for you as the consumer to not get caught up in a lot of the marketing because the pricing is the same regardless of the broker. Now, over 100 employees, when the carriers issue a quote to the market, if 3 brokers go to Aetna, Aetna's going to prepare a quote, and brokers 2 and 3 in line are getting a copy of the quote that's already been released to the market. The carriers, for obvious reasons, do not want to have multiple quotes available to the market. But at the end of the day, there may be, we'll call it a 1% wiggle room in the final pricing, maybe 2%, but you're not going to know about that unless you're an important client to your broker. And I kind of feel like the theme of what the presentation is, from my perspective, is it's really, are you an important client to your broker? I do know there's 3 things in life that I can count on, and it's death, taxes, and the insurance carriers are terrible. They are great at denying claims. They slow pay claims. They drag their feet on giving referrals, and that's more of a medical group issue. But it goes back to service, and things are going to break. Employees are going to get frustrated. Remember, you as a consumer, a purchaser of the health insurance, understand that your broker gets paid when you pay the invoice. So you get the monthly bill from Kaiser. The broker's commission is built into that. Very rarely do brokers actually submit separate invoices for compensation. So no matter who your broker is, they're getting paid the same. And so you're buying service. And that's how you should be evaluating and determining who's the best provider for you. I've always found that inertia and the status quo is your enemy. The brokers make a lot of money by convincing you to renew each year in the same product. That's just reality. And so you're going to have, and I know James and Archie are going to say the same thing. It's kind of gross sometimes how negligent brokers can be when their feet aren't held to the fire. There's no more nervous time for a broker than when there's a change in HR. New HR comes in, the relationships they had with prior HR are gone, and now there is accountability, and they have to reestablish themselves and show value. There's just so many lazy brokers. It's almost embarrassing to the industry. But in some sense, it's not fair to the brokers, and I'll tell you why, because their compensation is wildly drops off over time. So there are some brokerages that pay a broker for the first 4 years of the relationship only. So the broker might get 40% in year one, 40% in year two, 30%, and then down to 20% in year four. And then they're no longer paid on the group. So although they're tied to the group, they can't afford to help you because they have to keep hunting or they're going to lose their job. And so you're no longer working with the broker, you're working with the account manager. And so you keep having to ask yourself, are you an important client to your broker? In addition, some brokers, and this has been very common of late, as the consolidation amongst brokerages it's an epidemic. There's so much consolidation amongst my peers in the industry, and a lot of the larger brokerages, they're going to their brokers and they're looking at their clients that bring in less than $10,000 in annual commission to the brokerage. They're stripping that client of them. They're no longer paying them. And that client is now handled out of a national call center. And so as a consumer, you purchased X, you purchased this broker, you purchased the service, and due to the earnings demands of now being a publicly traded company, many clients who, you can have 40 employees and have a relationship with your broker, but they may not be getting compensated, or they may no longer be able to work with you, period, because you're not bringing in more than $10,000 of annual revenue to the brokerage. That's very common. To wrap this up, here's 4 things that I also just kind of want to put on your radar. So Kaiser used to be the carrier, I almost want to say kind of like state fund and workers' comp. Employers would put it in because it wasn't known to be of great value. Not many employees were clamoring for Kaiser, maybe as of 20 years ago. But Kaiser was so cheap. That is no longer the case. Kaiser is definitely no longer the cheapest option on the market. And that's really just due to the narrow networks. And just a quick explanation of a narrow network is you might have, let's say, 60 medical groups in LA County in the full network plan. And Aetna goes to those 60 and offers them a lesser compensation. 40 medical groups take that. They then go to those 40 and offer a lesser compensation. 20 of those medical groups take that. So now you have this carved out network that nobody's bragging about, acting like it's a great network, but it's much less expensive than the full network. And that's just killing Kaiser. Kaiser can't compete with that on a price point. So Kaiser's having to pivot from being a price point play to a quality play. And that's a very difficult transition for them to make. And so long term, they're really going to struggle to be relevant because they will just no longer be able to buy business like they could in the past. Another thing to be mindful for you is I call it the technology turf wars. So you have payroll providers who want you to use their system for the employee input for health insurance. You have brokers with their own technology, whether it be Ease or Employee Navigator. And then you have clients or buyers like yourself who want to use the payroll because it's less vendors. We get that, but it's expecting brokers to be experts with like an ADP platform or a Paycom or a Paycor platform. And so there's a lot of people fighting for that market and a lot of disruption. And it's something that, especially with the payroll providers, some of them purporting to also do health insurance, it's causing a lot of just kind of stress and uncertainty in the market there. Competition is dying too. It's kind of scary. There's Kaiser, there's the Blues, there's United Healthcare, and there's Aetna. Those are the four national players. Cigna, Humana, more of a regional player. But I'm concerned over time that as there's more consolidations, there's just less attractive carriers in each market. Healthcare is also very regional, and there's just the further consolidation. It's not a long-term trend that's in our favor. And finally, telehealth. Really, with COVID, telehealth took off like gangbusters. I'm convinced we're not far away from having plans that don't even allow for in-person providers. It'll be an emergency room only kind of situation. And it works really well because the consumers were forced to go that route during COVID, and the carriers are not going to back away from it. They're going to be putting up barriers to make it more expensive for you to go in person, and they're really going to be driving much more through telehealth moving forward. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to Archie.
Great insights. I've worked with Greg for many years, and he is up to speed on all elements of human capital management. So thanks for that overview, Greg. So my name is Archie Coop. I am the CEO of Power PEO Consulting and FinServ PEO Brokers. I got my career started at ADP. I learned a lot about what to do at ADP. I learned about taxes, 401k, HR, time clocks, PEO. I also learned a lot of things not to do. So I left ADP after 14 years because I saw so many companies moving to PEOs. And what I wanted to do is help be an advocate for those clients that were interested in looking at a PEO. So I established a PEO brokerage to really help companies empower them to make informed decisions about what PEO could be best for their business. Today's world, right, we're looking at over 500 PEOs available across the country. And unlike the small group market where there's no negotiating power really with health benefits in small group, in the PEOs are all going to provide different premiums for small businesses based on their carrier, based on where you're located, based on how they think you're going to perform. But today I'm just going to go through an overview of PEOs. There's a lot of ground to cover with PEO because it's not just health insurance. So I want to just give you a high level overview of PEOs, how PEO brokers have really emerged in the last 5 years to really help companies find the most suitable PEOs, how PEO brokers are here to stay, and ultimately how we empower companies to navigate challenging businesses, challenges with their businesses and employees. So what you're looking at right now is a non-PEO model, right? This is what 85% of small businesses and over 85% of large businesses are using. So in many ways, it's a fragmented solution. It doesn't always connect. In today's world, though, you can connect payroll to health benefits, like Greg mentioned. HR, maybe a separate platform, but what you see here is busy, right? When you move to a PEO, what happens is you move your employees under the federal ID number of a PEO. So PEOs are large aggregators. When you move your employees under the PEO's federal ID number, now you can access the PEO for HR in a fractional HR model. You can access their workers' comp premiums and risk management solutions. You access a Fortune 500 benefit platform. You have to use the PEO's payroll. So that's really the cornerstone of that relationship, is the employees being paid under the federal ID number. So your company no longer has the 941. The PEO has 1941 with all of their clients on it. With that being said, when companies move to a PEO, about 15% of small businesses use PEOs. A few years ago, it was 12%. So PEO is eating away at non-PEO market share. And these are many of the reasons why, you get a return on your investment, and these are all from white papers and analysis, but, PEO's users are 50% less likely to go out of business. You have less turnover when you're using a PEO. 70% of PEO clients report increased revenues. So you have all of these dynamics. Now, it also could be the case that a lot of PEO clients are in growth. They're trying to grow, right? They're kind of in a different category than, let's say, all the other businesses. But these are still pretty compelling reasons to at least consider a PEO. Now, what I found as a PEO broker, right, is if you call and if you discuss PEOs directly or if you want to get a quote from a PEO directly, they're going to do as much to build value and, try to build as much revenue as possible, because that's their whole purpose as sales reps working for PEOs. I really cut to the chase, and I really want to understand what is most important to that company. If you come to me and say, we want to just save money, then great. That is the initiative, right? So the PEO model, really, there's the aggregation model where you can tap into their economies of scale and their buying power to access lower cost health benefits, to access lower cost workers' comp, and the list goes on. So some companies, that's their catalyst to look at a PEO. Other companies are saying, hey, we have the X number of employees, we're going to be growing, we're going to be hiring employees in different states. So we have more complexity around managing the life cycle of our workforce. And we want to partner with a PEO because we believe that that's going to be most efficient for us. We don't want to, let's say, hire a full-time HR person, or we have a full-time HR person and don't want to hire a second. So we want to provide or access a fractional HR model to complement what we have in place today, so we can be a little more lean and nimble. That's really where I focus on. And if you are looking to move at the end of the game, the end game with any PEO strategy is really to help companies be more profitable, whether it's reducing hard dollar costs or making the process more efficient or mitigating risk, reducing the noise of HR, all of that. It's really designed to help companies be more profitable and find more financial bandwidth. So specifically, health benefits, I see substantial savings sometimes when the clients are a good fit for the PEO. Workers' comp, I have many companies that come to me and say, hey, our workers' comp is too high. We need premium reduction. PEOs can thrive in driving costs down by implementing lower premiums and pairing that with a true risk management strategy. EPLI premiums have gotten very expensive in the last few years. 401k, you can get lower expense ratios potentially with a PEO and lower costs. So the list goes on and on and on, but these are just some examples of where you can get lower premiums for what you're paying today. In terms of the PEO service model, really, you want that PEO to feel like an extension of your firm, right? What I've seen is when you are using some of the larger big box PEOs, you feel like a number. They can provide very good service and they have huge clients. The largest PEO has 700,000 employees paid through them. They are doing a good job of attracting and retaining employees or clients. Whereas I partner a lot with more of your boutique, more of your nimble PEOs, because the response time, the accountability, the service, and the people experience tends to just be better. But this is the traditional PEO service model. You have an HR person as your primary contact. And again, you have their cell phone number and they really work in a fractional capacity. And then you have a single point of contact for payroll, single point of contact for benefits, including a team that can answer employee related questions and whatnot. And they're a risk and safety consultant. So you kind of have this dream team of people that can help mitigate risk and also optimize whether it's your culture, your workforce, coming out, helping with compensation analysis, all of that. HR, again, it's some PEOs want, or some clients want the PEO to be their entire HR foundation. That's possible. Other companies, they are looking for the PEO to take some of that burden off of that HR generalist, that primary HR person that they have working for them. So pairing a PEO and a fractional HR model with an internal HR individual can really create harmony for everyone, especially the HR person who may not want to be just dragged into lots of tactical conversations, initiatives, and all of that. A huge push, over the last few years, companies have gone multi-state, obviously. One interesting fact is that a large PEO with about 170,000 worksite employees, they just came out with some interesting statistics saying that over their average client has employees in 4 different states, right? So now you need different employee manuals, you need different paid time off policies. There's a lot going on with that. So when you partner with a PEO, you're also accessing their nationwide workers' comp policies, EPLI policy, HR, and benefits. Again, this PEO solution, it's going to help you with your onboarding, I-9 completion, developing handbooks, time and attendance. They can integrate benefits into payroll, whether it's open market or it's on their master plan. You have a multiple employer plan with 401k. So it's really just a single source solution to help. As PEO brokers, we are here to identify, usually 3 to 5 PEOs that could be a good fit. We tell you the good, the bad, the ugly with all of those, and we really just empower you to make an informed decision about what PEO is going to be the best partner for your company. And this is just a financial analysis that we provide as a comparison. We go through taxes, benefits, workers' comp, everything, so you know the financial implications of changing. But really, we're here to help you make sure that the grass is going to be greener. So as Greg mentioned, when we, as working outside of these large brokerages and whatnot, we have a vested interest in finding solutions for the long run for you because we are compensated on a residual basis. So I am bringing solutions to you that you're happy with today, but I'm along this PEO journey with you throughout your PEO experience, and I'm here to help pivot, optimize, problem solve, whatever that is. So through a lot about PEOs. I have a lot more ground to cover, but that is it on the PEO side. James, I will turn things over to you.
I like the title expert for anything, so I'll take it. Really, for about 12 or 13 years, learned some of the inside secrets, quickly realized that maybe I'm not on the right side of healthcare. And so what I try to do now is educate those that purchase healthcare, i.e. employers, the C-suite, the executives, the HR team. And Greg mentioned this a little bit earlier, but healthcare is not what it used to be. Problems with it, access to care issues, things like that 10, 20 years ago didn't really exist or didn't exist as much. So what happened? What changed? All right, so if you look at what the healthcare options were 10, 15 years ago, employers had a lot of options. You had multiple carriers quoting regional HMOs, PPOs, high deductible plans, indemnity plans, minimum shared premium, level funding, self-funding, all of that. Since then, there has been that has caused, I apologize, I think I have a bad connection, but hopefully you can see that. Mass consolidation has taken place in the marketplace where really employers only have a handful of carriers to choose from, and they're all really offering the exact same thing. Now, there's a few additional things that we could add here in California, HealthNet or Kaiser. There's two different blue, but over that time, the mass consolidation. The first is prices have gone up. You cannot find an employer today that is paying less for healthcare than they were 10 years ago. Second, networks have actually gotten smaller. There used to be indemnity plans. You could really go anywhere. Now it's, oh, you can only go to this hospital if you go with this medical group and this PCP and not over here, right? Then the advent of narrow HMOs. Now there's narrow PPOs. Those aren't reduction in premium because we're cutting your doctors and hospitals in half. That's not really a solution.
I think we've got some connection issues. Archie, why don't you take lead and let's go ahead and jump into that. And then Archie will work on the tech.
Yeah, so in terms of, I work with companies that are using PEOs today, or they may not be using a PEO. I had a client, a company that reached out to me that was using a large PEO. So often I help companies who have gone to a PEO and they may not be getting the experience that they were expecting, right? Or maybe the service has gone down. So there's a range of reasons, but often a lot of companies I work with, they are using a PEO and they are looking for something better. I had a company that was introduced to me. They were using a large PEO and they were just having significant challenges in all areas because they were just not getting the attention that they needed. They were a larger company on the PEO side. Your average PEO client has about 25 employees. Certain PEOs, their average PEO client, now that's the entire industry. Some PEOs, their average client may be around 50 employees. This client had north of 250 employees. So they were on the larger end. But they were having challenges in workers' comp. They were having challenges in EPLI claims. When you have a lot of employees, there's more challenges that come up, especially during that COVID time of EPLI claims, HR, all of that. So anyway, the health insurance was also a challenge for them. But the health insurance couldn't be a barrier to them leaving. That wasn't like the catalyst to them leaving. They just were not going to accept an increase in their health insurance to change. So anyway, when I meet with a company that's been using a PEO for 2-3 years, I have no idea how competitive that health insurance is. I don't know what their renewal was year 1, year 2, 3, and so on. So and we wouldn't be having this conversation 6-7 years ago. During that time, PEOs were not health insurance agnostic. In the past, PEOs would say, if you're not using our master health plan for health insurance, we're not really interested in working with you. A modern PEO today, they are health insurance agnostic. They are here to not force their master plan on you. They're not here to say, if you are not using our health insurance, we want nothing to do with you. In fact, it's the opposite. PEOs want to make sure that companies are using the right health insurance for their company and their solution. There are PEOs still today, though, that will say, if you're not using our health insurance, we don't want you part of it. Well, those PEOs are behind the curve, in my humble opinion.
The healthcare for the PEO, oftentimes in our experience together, it's really a pass-through, and that they don't necessarily want to earn business on the healthcare pricing because they know that could be a very short-term solution to bringing in accounts. They also understand it's not their core competency. Yeah. And so, like you said, the more modern PEOs, they're saying, client, if you want to do the healthcare outside of us, we're actually really good with that. Is that a fair statement?
And a lot of the reason why is because PEOs, their health insurance, that when they aggregate their clients together, they need that health insurance to perform well. So when a company goes to a PEO, they may not understand that there could be some volatility when you're using a PEO because it is tied to, it functions like large group. So if you have high utilization and you're using a PEO, the PEO is going to give you a larger renewal to align the risk with the premium, right? In small group, you are not penalized or rewarded for your utilization. In the PEO model, you are. So really what happens, and I'm going to jump into this client. So what happened is, they had over 250 lives. They had sub 50% participation. That's a little bit of a challenge in health insurance. So it wasn't great to the carriers, but they had been using the PO for over 10 years. So we had no baseline. So I go to Greg and James because we need to understand where is the most competitive health insurance. Now is the time to look. Obviously I would we would source PEO master plans through different PEOs. This was a little challenging because they had Kaiser and then they had another carrier. So Kaiser had to stay in the mix. And over 50% of employees enrolled were using Kaiser. So it was very complicated. But we do not know how competitive their PEO rates until we compare to the open market. The open market is a baseline. If you are beating the open market, you're winning with the PEO on health insurance. If your health insurance with the PEO is more expensive than the open market, then, if it's not too much disruption, pivot to the open market and stay with that current PEO. But that's why I bring in Greg and James, because this was a really challenging one. So, Greg did the underwriting on open market, a large group. And Greg, what was your experience working with that?
Yeah, the challenge is we have to sell the case to the underwriter, and with less than 50% participation, it's not the most attractive risk, right? And there was less participation than would make an underwriter happy because the employer contribution was just not adequate. So risk-wise, it wasn't that great. We had such a heavy population on Kaiser that your non-Kaiser carriers, they all want their pound of flesh. Typically, they're going to want a majority of the insured. Some are really greedy and want a majority of the eligible. And what was a further struggle was when we went back to Kaiser, the carriers, you are really fighting an uphill battle as a consumer, because what Kaiser said was, Kaiser had no problem with the client leaving their current PEO, but Kaiser said, we're going to match the rate they're paying today. So the client wasn't even able to benefit from open market pricing for another 12 months. That was Kaiser's way of discouraging them from leaving the PEO. Again, inertia is your enemy. And for Archie and I to convince a client to leave Kaiser entirely for 12 months to come back and get an open market rate on Kaiser,
not going to happen.
It's such a challenge because people are just tied to Kaiser. And even if we say, hey, we'll be back in 12 months, they just can't do it.
We ultimately got declined by every carrier on the open market, right? So
yeah, except Kaiser, and it was the same price.
And for any companies on this that have over 100 employees that are using a PEO, something I would recommend is that for any valid waivers, you have the reasons why. A lot of PEOs will not force your employees to confirm the reason why. Also, if you are a large group using a PEO, it's very unlikely that they're going to give you medical loss runs, your MLR reports. You may not have the visibility. So to your utilization, right? And those are reasons because of carriers. They may not want the PEOs giving their clients. Small group is not technically supposed to get medical loss reports. So it's a little bit complicated, but at the end of the day, you have less transparency when you're using a PEO on a large group than you would if you were on open market generally. Would you agree with that, Greg?
Well, actually, James, I saw your hand, and I know you love nothing more than a good risk claims analysis.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and this is where I wanted to jump in, and apologies for the technical difficulties earlier, but part of the presentation was, what's changed in the last 1 to 2 years is this data and transparency, where it doesn't matter if you're a carrier or a PEO or whatever, there's usually an imbalance of data exists, but who has it and who's leveraging it? Typically, it's not the client, it's the carrier. So they're able to price the premium based on where they, with a very high degree of certainty know your claims are going to run. And then there's some certain things that they do on the back end to protect themselves on the unknown, but then build in a pretty healthy profit. And the group is none the wiser. They don't know it. They don't see it. The data is not shared. What has changed is the ability for some very smart people have gone in and can take a group census, pair it up with the CMS, which is the Center for Medicare Services, and actually figure out what a group's loss ratio is with a high degree of certainty. What specialty drugs are they taking? What hospitalizations have they had? What's their general utilization? And this then takes that data, gives it to the group, give it to Greg, give it to Archie, and do a true analysis with information that previously they wouldn't have been able to get, to do a true evaluation of, well, what's the best fit for the group? And this is truly a change that has only happened in, I mean, I'll call it the last 18 to 24 months to develop. So it's a very new enterprising deal that carriers are losing leverage. Data is the great equalizer. Data levels the playing field.
James and I have had this conversation countless times that in large group medical, when you have a difficult renewal, the carrier, you pay for it immediately. And the struggle is if I get a big renewal, my fully insured solution, and I go out to the market, it's kind of like my report card. And no other carrier wants to risk taking me over because there's material claims because I got penalized by the incumbent carrier. On the flip side, all those years where you underutilize, you still get that same trend renewal from the carrier. So you're penalized for bad claims immediately, and you are never rewarded for having less than expected claims. And that's why the anxiety of a client going to like a self-insured solution like James is, you are getting abused in the fully insured market on large group. But more so now, we've got the data that James can just dig so much deeper into the risk analysis.
I love that Chris just put into the chat what was going in my head. James, since we're on this topic, would love to kind of have you jump in and give us a little bit more background on self-insured, because we've got HR leaders on this call, VPs, CHROs. I think that might be an option more and more to look at. Ed Johnson made a comment, self-insured can be pretty risky. Stop loss can help limit liability. Sometimes partial self-insured. Would love to get your commentary, maybe a little bit of color to that, to how you would advise an HR leader to be really smart and almost scary as they're evaluating that option.
And I don't know if it's worth it to go back and look at the slides, but that's essentially kind of what that is about. And what we try to do is educate business leaders on how do you actually make a health plan. If you're moving companies and you're like, okay, well, I'm with the same carrier, but my rate was $500 for employee only, and now it's $800 for employee only, and it's a worse plan. Like, what happened? There's all of these elements that go into building the health plan. And Ed mentioned earlier, stop loss. Stop loss is a huge component of that. There's two forms of stop loss. The first is individual or specific. Think of that like per claim. You have a $500,000 claimant. Somebody could have been in an accident. It could be cancer treatment, end-stage renal, things like that. Well, every single insurer buys stop loss. You don't see it, but that's how they limit their risk. The second form is what's called aggregate stop loss. So aggregate, think all claims. So if anybody's been told, oh, you're getting a big increase because you ran over 100% loss ratio and the carrier lost money, well, now they're going to make that money and more the next year because they're giving us a 40 or 50% increase. BS. They had aggregate insurance. They didn't pay a dime over that. They never lost money. They're using that to help increase the cost. So stop loss is incredibly important to Ed's point in getting those two things. Now, somebody else mentioned partial self-funding. Well, partial self-funding is technically any self-funded plan that has stop loss. And you won't find many companies, save for maybe Apple or Facebook or Ford Motor Company, that doesn't have, and those are all self-insured companies that don't have some form of stop loss. Really, any group with less than 500 or even 1,000 enrolled employees should have both aggregate and individual stop loss. Companies that are $1,000 or more might drop the aggregate because it's not as important. You're more credible. This gets kind of into the underwriting portion of that. But building that comprehensive plan, the great trade secret is when you're self-funded, you're just building the exact same plan as a fully insured carrier. The difference is instead of the carrier keeping the extra money, the client keeps the extra money. And then HR executives and the leadership team can redistribute those funds as needed. Maybe you get better benefits, maybe you have additional HR support, whatever that corporate benefit goal is to align with the corporate mission.
And I know there's a lot of information on self-insured we skipped over. Highly recommend click on James's LinkedIn profile in the chat, scroll up to the top, send him a note. James, I'm sure you'll be more than happy to send over your slides deck, have a follow-up conversation. I think we've got a great question here. Chris, thank you for teeing that up. One of the biggest challenges in looking at options and doing the right smart thing for a company is when you've got to convince the CEO, we're going to go to market. I want to make sure we've got the best thing for the company, especially when we've grown or we've got multi-states. How would you recommend HR leadership approach that with the CEO or other leadership when it's real easy to just keep things the same, status quo?
Yeah, I think James and I are working on a case right now where James is pulling his hair out. Understanding so I picked up a client and about 150 employees. I've been with Kaiser for 20 years. And we ran a partially self-insured quote with James. Savings is expected to be $493,000, which is about 25% of their annual spend. And HR is like, I don't want to leave Kaiser. And I'm like, well, tell your CEO I just put an offer to save you $493,000. And she goes, well, he doesn't want to leave Kaiser. And I'm like, how much do you need to save to fall out of love with Kaiser? So it's, and Archie, James, we all take the same approach. We're not trying to steer you. Like, we're really solution agnostic and different. We're just going to educate and put the options out there. And at the end of the day, especially with James, it can be a multi-year education. It's bringing up self-insured. It's quoting it. And then they have a bad renewal. And so now we've kind of laid the groundwork, and it takes multiple years usually.
So I imagine that you're providing a lot of the information to HR leadership to take to the CEO. See, the thing is, Greg, you don't have the CFO involved. CFO would say, we're leaving Kaiser in a heartbeat for $495,000. We found the CFO, when it comes to health insurance renewals, really can be an advocate in that way in some ways versus the CEO others. And you've given the advice that we hear from a lot of HR leaders is sometimes it takes education, and you've got to find one champion, and that champion finds someone, and then it can spread from there.
And that's why a lot of times that we package the video recommendations so we can track if it's been seen by others. And so once that gets outside of HR, it can spread organically amongst the C-suite. So we know we've disseminated the information.
I think a lot of these solutions, it's not an either or. I mean, it used to kind of be like, well, we're going to get all these savings, but the employees are going to hate it. It's going to be a lot of disruption, and it's going to be very difficult for everybody. A lot of the things that Archie just mentioned, everybody wins in that scenario. In self-funding, everybody can win in that scenario. You can improve your benefits, you can enhance the employee experience, you get more data, and you can have the financial savings. It's not like going to buy a car. I spend more, therefore I expect a better experience. Oftentimes it's in healthcare, it's the exact opposite. It's just, how do you structure the plan?
In the PEO context, right, often I work with companies that are very happy with their PEO. So they're not looking to leave their PEO, but they do want to see how competitive their health insurance is. So they are evaluating the health insurance component of a PEO relationship of what they may be happy with. What I've seen is that an evaluation can do one of two things. It can either let companies know that, hey, you have other options that you could move to, whether that is, and in my world, we're looking at the PEO master plan, we're looking at open market, and then we're also looking at self-insured. So those are all options. But it also may reinforce that the status quo is the best for them. And that essentially is something that, as Greg mentioned, as brokers, we don't want to be on the sidelines just sticking with the status quo. We want to make sure that if a company is using a solution, they know what their options are and they know that it's the best for them. With what Greg and James and myself are doing, we are now collaborating. We are engineering solutions. So in the past, if you went to a PEO, they'd say you have to fit in the side of this box to qualify and use these and whatnot. Now, Greg and James are reaching out to me because they have a client that wants to use their self-insured health insurance, but they may want a multi-state HR and payroll solution as well. So we are changing how things are done, and we are engineering these solutions and looking at, under every stone to make sure that during that evaluation, we're covering it. We're not going to leave anything behind.
And that's one of the themes that we've been seeing through this HR series today, is that the future of work, which a lot of this is the current state of work, is customizations. Everyone wants what they want, and it's no longer a one size fits all. So as HR leaders, understanding that it really can be a pick and choose buffet, and finding we don't have to go with all one solution, and we can create some customizations for the organization that we're serving. So that maybe the CEO doesn't have to give up Kaiser, but we can have another solution as well. Greg, James, RG, thank you so much for your insights. And again, they're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Truly, as some of the leading experts in what they do, feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn or reach out to me, and I'm happy to make the introduction. And have a fantastic rest of your week. Thank you.